The room was silent when the lawyer slid a sealed envelope across the table. The paper looked old, yellow at the edges, and my name was written on it in a shaky hand. He cleared his throat and said, "Your father wanted you to open this alone." My heart stopped. My father? He'd been dead for more than 50 years, or at least that's what my mother had always told me. My fingers trembled as I picked up the envelope. The wax seal was cracked, but still unbroken. For a moment I couldn't breathe. Every sound in that office faded. The ticking clock, the rustle of papers, even the lawyer's voice. All I could see was my name on that letter and the weight of everything my mother had kept from me. If you think family secrets die with the people who keep them, you're wrong. Sometimes they wait, buried deep, until the day you're forced to face them. Before we go any further, make sure you subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I promise, what's inside this letter will shock you. My name is Helen Marston. I'm 68 years old, and last month I buried my mother, Margaret. She was 89, strong-willed, proud, and complicated. We didn't always see eye to eye, but she was my only real family after my husband passed 10 years ago. I thought I knew her story. She raised me alone after my father died when I was 5. She told me he was a good man who made bad choices. That was all. I never asked more, and she never offered. The will reading took place in a small law office downtown. The air smelled like old books and lemon polish. My daughter Lydia sat beside me, scrolling on her phone, impatient as always. My son Michael was there too, quiet and calm, trying to keep the peace like he always did. The lawyer, Mr. Graves, read through the usual formalities, property, savings, small things that didn't really matter. My mother had been careful with every detail. Then he paused, adjusted his glasses, and said, "Mrs. Marston, there's something else your mother left for you, a personal item. But this one, it isn't from her. It's from your father." I remember how Lydia looked up sharply. "Her father? What does that mean?" she asked. Mr. Graves hesitated. "Your mother instructed that this envelope be given to you alone. She said it contains a message that would explain everything." I stared at the envelope on the table. My pulse pounded in my ears. "My father's dead," I whispered. The lawyer's eyes softened. "That's what your mother wanted you to believe." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. I couldn't speak. I just sat there, frozen, staring at that envelope as if it might vanish. When we left the office, Lydia sighed in frustration. "Mom, it's probably some old nonsense. You don't have to open it." Michael put a hand on my shoulder. "Maybe you should read it when you're ready." Ready. I didn't even know what that meant. I held that envelope all the way home, feeling its weight in my hands like it carried 100 unspoken years. That night, I placed it on the kitchen table beside a cup of cold tea. I couldn't stop staring at it. I thought about my mother's voice, her quiet strength, her need to control everything. What secret had been worth keeping for a lifetime? Part of me wanted to tear it open right there, but another part, the part that still felt like a scared little girl, was afraid that once I did, I'd never see my parents the same way again. As the clock struck midnight, I reached for the envelope again. The seal caught the light. I whispered to the empty room, "What did you hide from me, Mom?" And that's where everything began to change. That night, I sat alone in my kitchen, staring at the envelope as if it were alive. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the old floorboards. I had buried my mother 2 weeks ago, but it felt like she was still here, watching me, judging me, daring me to open what she had kept hidden for a lifetime. I ran my fingers over the wax seal again and again, afraid that once I opened it, I'd lose whatever piece I had left. I thought about my childhood, about how little my mother ever spoke about my father. Whenever I asked, she would say, "He's gone, Helen. Leave it alone." There was always a shadow behind her eyes when she said it, something cold and final. I used to imagine he was a soldier, a hero who died saving others. But now, sitting in that dim kitchen with her words echoing in my mind, I wondered if that had ever been true. Finally, I took a deep breath and broke the seal. The paper tore softly, like a whisper. Inside was a single folded letter, written in faded blue ink. My hands shook as I unfolded it. The handwriting was elegant and careful, and at the bottom was a name I hadn't seen since I was a child. Edward Marston, my father. The letter began simply, "My dearest Helen, if you are reading this, then your mother has left this world, and so have most of my chances to tell you the truth. I was never meant to disappear from your life. I was forced to." I felt my chest tighten. Forced to? By who? My eyes kept moving down the page. "Your mother and I loved each other once, deeply, but she was a proud woman. When I was accused of stealing from the company I worked for, she refused to stand beside me. She said my shame would ruin you. I wanted to fight for my name, for our family, but she made her choice. She took you and left before my trial even began." I dropped the letter on the table, my hands trembling. My mother had always been my example of honesty and strength, but now, piece by piece, that image was cracking. I picked the letter up again and read the next lines, with my throat dry. "I served 5 years in prison for a crime I did not commit. When I was finally cleared, your mother was gone. Every letter I sent her came back unopened. I never stopped trying, Helen. I never stopped loving you." Tears stung my eyes. My mother had always told me he abandoned us, that he was selfish, unreliable, weak. But this letter told another story, one filled with betrayal, fear, and silence. I kept reading until the words faded off mid-sentence, as if the writer had been interrupted. The bottom half of the page was torn. I turned it over and saw something scribbled hastily on the back. An address. 314 Rosewood Lane. The air left my lungs. The name meant nothing to me, but something about it made my heart race. I read it again and again, feeling like I was staring at the first piece of a puzzle I didn't know existed. I sat back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. My thoughts were spinning. Why would my mother hide this? Why keep a man's love locked away for decades? Maybe she thought she was protecting me. Maybe she wanted to erase her past. But at what cost? The next morning, Lydia came by to check on me. She noticed the opened envelope on the counter and frowned. "So, you finally read it," she said. I nodded slowly. "It's from my father." Her expression softened, but only for a moment. "Mom, don't get lost in this. Whatever it says, it's too late to change anything." I looked her straight in the eye. Too late doesn't mean it's not true. Michael came in later that day with groceries. He was always more patient, always kinder. When I told him about the letter, he listened quietly. "Maybe you should go to that address," he said. "You'll never stop wondering if you don't." Lydia rolled her eyes. Or she could just let it go. It's been what? 50 years? Whoever he was, he's probably dead. But I couldn't let it go. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the name, Edward Marston, and the address burned into my mind. I thought about all those birthdays, holidays, and lonely nights my mother and I had spent together. How many times had she looked at me and carried that secret behind her smile? By morning, I had made up my mind. I packed a small bag, put on my coat, and took my mother's old Buick out of the garage. As I turned the key, a strange calm came over me. For the first time in years, I felt like I was doing something for myself, not out of duty or grief, but out of need. Need for truth, for closure, for a piece of my life that had been stolen. As I drove down the quiet road out of town, the sun began to rise, painting the sky in pale pink and gold. I didn't know what I would find at 314 Rosewood Lane. Maybe a house, maybe a grave, maybe just another dead end. But deep inside, I knew I couldn't go back to pretending I didn't care. My mother's secrets had built the world I grew up in. Now it was my turn to tear that world apart, one truth at a time. The drive to Rosewood Lane felt longer than it really was. The farther I went, the smaller the towns became, until all that was left were winding, country roads and endless fields of dry grass. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Every mile brought a new wave of doubt. What if the letter was a cruel mistake? What if the address led to nothing? Or worse, what if the person waiting there didn't want to see me at all? The GPS showed the turn for Rosewood Lane, a narrow dirt road lined with maple trees, whose leaves had already turned red and gold. The name sounded peaceful, but there was something haunting about how quiet it was. I drove slowly until I saw an old farmhouse sitting behind a half-broken fence. The mailbox was rusted, the paint on the door peeling. A single window glowed faintly with light. My heart pounded. This was it, 314 Rosewood Lane. I parked and sat in silence for a moment, gathering my breath. Then I got out, my shoes crunching on gravel. The air smelled like damp wood and autumn leaves. As I climbed the porch steps, the door opened before I could even knock. An elderly man stood there, thin and pale, his eyes an icy blue that felt oddly familiar. His hair was snow white, his hands trembling as he leaned on a cane. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. Then he whispered, "You look just like your mother." My throat went dry. "Who are you?" I asked, though deep down I already knew. He took a shaky step forward. "I'm your father, Helen, Edward Marston." The world tilted. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but nothing could have prepared me for the reality of it. My knees felt weak, and I had to grip the door frame to keep from falling. "You can't be," I managed to say. "My father died decades ago. That's what she told me." Edward's eyes filled with tears. "I know what she told you, but I never died. I've been right here all these years." I felt my chest tighten with anger and disbelief. "Why didn't you find me? Why didn't you come back?" He lowered his head. "I tried. Every year, I sent letters. She sent them back unopened. She told me that if I loved you, I would stay away. And I believed her. I thought she was protecting you from my shame." His voice broke on the last word. He turned and motioned for me to come inside. The house smelled like old books and pine wood. The walls were lined with photographs, some faded, some new. In several of them, I saw a young man holding a baby with dark curls. I recognized the face. It was me. He led me to a worn armchair and sat down across from me. "I've thought about this day for so long," he said quietly. "I didn't think I'd live to see it." I didn't know what to say. My emotions swung between anger, sorrow, and something I couldn't name. "Why did she lie to me?" I asked, my voice trembling. Edward sighed and stared at the floor. "Your mother was proud. She couldn't bear the thought of raising you while people whispered about me. When I was arrested for embezzlement, she believed I was guilty. I begged her to believe me, but she walked out before the trial even started. When I got out of prison and cleared my name, she was gone. She took you with her and vanished." I felt tears burn my eyes. "So she punished you by erasing you, and me by erasing the truth." He nodded slowly. "She thought she was protecting you from my mistakes. I spent years trying to hate her for that, but I couldn't. I knew she did it out of fear, not cruelty." He got up and walked over to a small wooden box on a shelf. He opened it and took out a stack of old letters tied with a ribbon. "These are all the letters I wrote to you, Helen. Every year on your birthday, every Christmas, every time I saw a photograph of a little girl that reminded me of you. I never stopped being your father." My hands shook as I took the bundle. The paper was yellowed, the ink faded. My name was written on every envelope in the same neat handwriting. I pressed them to my chest, and something inside me broke. For 60 years, I had lived believing I was unwanted, abandoned, and all along, he had been here, waiting for me to know the truth. We spent the next hour talking. He told me about his life after prison, how he moved to this quiet town and worked as a carpenter, how he never remarried, how he sometimes saw my mother in the grocery store when they were young before she left, and she would turn away without a word. I listened, heart heavy, feeling the years between us crumble like dust. Before I left, he handed me a small photograph. It was my mother, younger, smiling, standing beside him. They looked happy, almost radiant. On the back of the photo, in her handwriting, were the words, "For our Helen, may she always know love." I felt tears fill my eyes again. "She never wanted me to see this, did she?" He shook his head. "She couldn't bear her own guilt." As I walked back to my car, I turned to see him standing at the porch, a fragile figure against the fading light. I realized that the man I thought I'd lost had been alive all along, waiting for me to come home. The drive back was quiet. My mind was spinning, but beneath the shock, there was peace, a fragile kind of peace that comes when lies finally lose their power. I didn't know what I would tell Lydia or Michael yet, but one thing was certain. My mother's version of the past was gone forever, and I was ready to face whatever truth came next. When I woke up the next morning, I could still smell the faint scent of pine and old paper from my father's house on my hands. I had barely slept. The images of his trembling face, his soft voice, and the stack of letters he gave me ran through my mind again and again. The truth I had spent my whole life searching for had found me, but it didn't bring the peace I expected. Instead, it left a hollow ache in my chest that no amount of tears could fill. I sat at the kitchen table with the letters spread out before me. There were dozens of them, each one dated year after year, from when I was 6 until I was well into my 40s. My father had written every single one, even when he knew they'd never reach me. The envelopes were marked "Return to Sender" in my mother's handwriting. Seeing it made my stomach twist. She hadn't just hidden the truth, she had actively kept it from me. With shaking hands, I opened the first letter. "My darling Helen, you turned 6 today. I remember how your eyes lit up when you saw your first snowfall. I hope you're still as full of wonder as you were that day. I wish I could have been there to see you blow out your candles. Maybe one day you'll know why I wasn't." I stopped reading and pressed the paper to my chest. It felt like holding a memory I was never supposed to have. I opened another, written when I was 12. "I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I want you to know that I'm proud of you. You deserve to grow up without shame. I hope your mother found a way to forgive me." Every line was filled with love, regret, and an aching kind of hope. I cried quietly, realizing how much time had been stolen from both of us, time that could never be replaced. At the bottom of the box, beneath the letters, was a small wooden locket wrapped in cloth. I opened it and saw a tiny photograph inside, my baby picture on one side, and on the other, my father's smiling face. Behind it was a folded note in my mother's handwriting. My heart pounded as I unfolded it. "If she ever finds you, tell her the truth. She deserves to know." The words didn't make sense at first. Why would my mother write that after everything she had done to hide him from me? I turned the note over and saw a date written in pencil, May 1962. That was the same year my father had been released from prison. I drove back to his house that afternoon, the box of letters resting on the passenger seat. When I arrived, he was sitting on the porch, bundled in an old sweater, staring at the sky. He smiled weakly when he saw me. "You came back," he said. "I had to," I replied. "There's more you need to tell me." He nodded slowly and gestured for me to sit beside him. "I was hoping you'd ask." Inside the house, he brought out a dusty photo album I hadn't noticed before. The pages were filled with black and white photographs, my parents, young and in love, holding me as a baby. But there were other pictures too, a woman I didn't recognize. "She's the missing piece," he said quietly. "Your mother's sister, Clara." I looked at him in disbelief. Mom never mentioned a sister. She wouldn't. Clara and I were close before I ever met your mother. Too close, maybe. When your mother found out, it nearly destroyed her. But after Clara died giving birth, your mother did something extraordinary. She adopted the baby. I stared at him, my mouth dry. "What are you saying?" He looked me straight in the eye, tears forming. "I'm saying that baby was you, Helen. You were Clara's child. Your mother raised you as her own." The words hit me like a wave of ice. I couldn't breathe. My mother wasn't my mother. The woman who scolded me, hugged me, and sang me to sleep wasn't the one who gave me life. "That can't be true," I whispered. "You're wrong," Edward's voice cracked. "I wish I were, but your mother wanted to protect you from the shame of it all. Clara was young, unmarried, and dying. Margaret made me promise never to tell you. She thought it would ruin your life, and for years I obeyed her." I stood up, pacing across the room, my mind spinning. Everything I had ever known, every memory, every story, had been built on lies told in the name of love. I felt betrayed, but beneath that anger was something else. Sorrow. My mother hadn't done this out of hatred. She'd done it out of fear. Fear of losing me, fear of judgment, fear of her own heart breaking again. I looked back at my father. His eyes were filled with regret. "Why now?" I asked. "Why tell me this now?" He sighed deeply. "Because I don't have much time left, and because your mother wanted you to know before I go." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Then I walked to him and took his hand. "You both loved me," I said softly, "just in completely different ways." He smiled faintly, tears slipping down his wrinkled cheeks. You were always loved, Helen, even when the truth was too heavy for us to carry. 2 weeks later, my father passed away peacefully in his sleep. I found him in his chair by the window, the morning sun spilling over him, his hand resting on one of the letters he had written. On his nightstand was the photograph of my mother, still smiling, as she had all those years ago. At the funeral, I placed the locket they had given me inside his coat pocket, closing it gently. For the first time in my life, I felt like both my parents were finally at peace with each other and with me. Standing there, I realized something I never had before. Truth doesn't destroy love. It deepens it. It hurts, it breaks you, but it also sets you free. And for the first time in nearly 70 years, I felt free. It's been 3 months since my father passed away, and not a single day goes by without me thinking about everything I learned in those final weeks. Sometimes I still wake up expecting to hear his soft voice or see his worn flannel sweater draped over the chair by the window. Other times, I catch myself talking to my mother out loud as I cook breakfast, asking her why she made the choices she did. For the first time in my life, I understand that love is not always gentle. Sometimes it hides itself in silence, in fear, in sacrifice. And now, sitting by the fireplace of my quiet house, I finally feel the weight of all those years lifting. The wooden box of letters sits on the mantel. I keep it there not as a reminder of pain, but of truth. I still read. One every morning, almost like a prayer. The ink is faded now, and the edges are soft, but the words never lose their power. They remind me that I wasn't abandoned, as I once believed. I was loved in secret, fiercely and endlessly. My father's words have become my strength. He wrote not for himself, but for the daughter he hoped would one day forgive, and I have. One chilly evening, I decided to visit the cemetery. The sun was setting behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. I parked the car and walked slowly toward the 2 headstones that now stood side by side, my mother's and my father's. For the first time, they were together again, the way they should have been all along. The air was still, the only sound the rustle of autumn leaves under my feet. I placed a small bouquet of lilies between the graves and sat down on the cold stone bench. For a while, I didn't say anything. I just listened. To the wind, to the quiet, to my own heartbeat. Then I took a deep breath and spoke softly. I know now why you both did what you did, I said. You were scared. You lost so much, and you didn't want to lose me too. But I wish you'd trusted me with the truth. I would have loved you anyway. A tear rolled down my cheek, but it wasn't the kind that hurts. It was the kind that heals. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the locket my father had given me. The tiny photograph inside was worn now, but their faces were still there, young, hopeful, unaware of the storms ahead. I kissed the locket gently and placed it on the ground between the 2 graves. This belongs to both of you, I whispered, because love, no matter how broken, always finds its way back home. The wind picked up, and for a moment, I could have sworn I heard my mother's laugh, soft and distant, blending with the rustle of leaves. It didn't frighten me. It comforted me. I knew she was at peace now, and so was he. When I returned home, I sat in my armchair by the fire and opened one of the letters I hadn't read before. It was one of the last ones my father wrote, and it began with the words, "If you ever find me, I hope it's not too late for us." Reading that line made me realize that, in some ways, it never had been too late. We had found each other, and even though our time together was short, it was enough. I decided to frame one of the letters and hang it in my living room. It's the one where he wrote, "Love doesn't disappear, Helen. It just waits for the truth to set it free." Every time I walk past it, I smile. It reminds me that even when life feels unfair, it has a strange way of giving you exactly what you need when you're ready to receive it. Over time, I started sharing the story with my children. Lydia cried when she heard the truth, not because she was sad, but because she said it made sense now, why I was the kind of mother who struggled to talk about the past. Michael, ever the quiet one, hugged me and said, "You did what they couldn't, Mom. You faced the truth and made peace with it." Hearing that filled me with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. These days I've begun writing again. Simple things, short stories, little reflections on life and memory. Sometimes I write about my mother's laughter or my father's letters. Sometimes I write about the power of forgiveness. I don't know if anyone will ever read them, but I know they help me remember who I am. Not just Helen, the daughter of Secret, but Helen, the woman who learned to forgive the impossible. One afternoon, as I watched the sunset through the window, I thought about how everything had come full circle. My parents' love story began in silence and ended in peace. Their truth had been buried under shame and fear, but in the end, it rose again, just like the sun after a long winter. I smiled to myself and whispered, "You both got what you wanted, didn't you? Me safe, me loved, me finally free." The fire crackled beside me, and I felt calm in a way I hadn't in decades. My heart was lighter, my mind clear. I understood now that the past isn't something you can erase or rewrite. It's something you accept, piece by piece, until it becomes part of who you are. And so, if anyone ever asks me what I learned from all of this, I'll tell them this simple truth. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing peace over pain. It means learning that even the deepest wounds can heal when touched by honesty. As I close my father's last letter for the final time, I look straight into the camera and say, if this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And remember, no secret stays buried forever. The truth always finds its way home.